He walked into my kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and said, "We need to talk about how much space you take up in here." Not hello, not good morning, not even a glance in my direction. Just that. I was standing at the counter with my hands wrapped around a mug of tea, the one my late husband had bought me years ago at a shop in Stratford, Ontario. The one with the small chip on the handle that I always turned away from my mouth out of habit. I had been up since 6, the way I always am, watching the light come through the kitchen window, the way it does in October, pale and sideways, not quite warm enough to be comforting. I did not answer him right away. I took a sip of my tea. I set the mug down carefully on the coaster, and I thought, this is my kitchen. This is my house. This is the home I have lived in for 31 years. But I did not say any of that. I said, "Good morning." He closed the refrigerator without taking anything out and walked back down the hallway to the bedroom. My daughter's bedroom. The room where she used to keep her figure skating ribbons on a corkboard above the desk. That was 11 months after they had moved in. I want to be clear about something before I go any further, because I know how these stories sound from the outside. I know what people think when an older woman says her son-in-law was difficult. They think she is overprotective of her daughter. They think she is overprotective of her daughter. They think she never liked him to begin with. They think she is the kind of mother who cannot let go. I am not that woman. When my daughter first told me she was seeing someone, I was genuinely happy for her. She had been on her own for a long time, working hard, building her career in healthcare administration, not making much time for anything outside of work. When she called me one Sunday afternoon and said she had met someone at a friend's birthday dinner, her voice had that particular lightness to it that I had not heard in years. The kind of lightness that comes from the beginning of something. His name was Keith. He was 41 years old, 2 years older than my daughter. He worked in commercial real estate, or had worked in it, I should say, because by the time I properly met him, things in that industry had apparently become challenging, which was a word he used often and in many different contexts. The first time I had them over for dinner, he shook my hand very firmly and complimented my house. He said it was a good investment in a good neighborhood. He said the lot size was impressive. He did not ask me anything about myself until my daughter nudged him, and then he asked me what I had done before I retired, and when I told him I'd been a high school English teacher for 28 years, he said, "That must have been rewarding," in the tone of someone who did not find it rewarding at all. I told myself I was being uncharitable. My daughter looked at him the way she did, and I told myself that was enough. They moved in on a Saturday in November 2 years ago now. My daughter had been renting an apartment in Kitchener, about 40 minutes from my house. Keith had been subletting a place from a friend, something that was always described as temporary. When the friend needed the apartment back and Keith's real estate work had become more than challenging, when it had essentially stopped, my daughter called me and asked if they could stay for a few months while they sorted things out. A few months. I want to be honest about what I said yes to, because I think it matters. I said yes to a few months. I said yes to my daughter and, because she loved him, to Keith. I said yes to the inconvenience of sharing my bathroom and adjusting my grocery routine and not watching certain programs in the living room after 9 o'clock because they needed to sleep and the sound carried. I said yes because she is my daughter. That is the whole reason. What I did not say yes to, what was never part of any conversation, was the indefinite arrangement that followed. The months stretched. Keith applied for a few positions and did not get them, and stopped applying. My daughter's salary from the hospital was covering their car payments and their phones and the streaming services and their weekend trips to visit his family in Sudbury. She was tired. She was working long hours. She would come home and sit at my kitchen table and eat the dinner I had made, because I was cooking most nights by then, and she would look like a woman who had already given everything she had. I tried to talk to her about it, gently, more than once. She would say she knew. Things were going to change. Keith was working on something. I did not push. I told myself she was a grown woman, and this was her life, and my job was to be here, not to manage her. But I did not expect what came next. It started gradually, the way these things do. Keith began using the living room as his office. That was fine at first. He had his laptop there, a notebook, a coffee cup that left rings on the side table I had bought at an estate sale in Cambridge. Fine, he was working. Or looking for work. I gave him the space. Then the television became part of it. He would put on news programs or sports in the background while he worked, and because he was there all day and I was the one coming and going, I started feeling like a guest in my own living room. I would want to sit in my chair, the wing-back chair near the window that catches the afternoon sun, and he would be there. All his things would be there, and I would end up in the kitchen or the upstairs sitting room instead. I told myself it was temporary. Then came the comments. Small ones at first. He would say things like, "You know, the Wi-Fi would work a lot better if we moved the router," as though my router was something that needed to be optimized for his benefit. He said the shelves in the entryway made the space feel cluttered. He said the bedroom, my daughter's room, the room they were staying in, needed a proper desk, and could I move the dresser that had been in that room since I bought it at a Mennonite woodworker's shop 20 years ago to the basement. I moved the dresser. I do not know why I moved the dresser. I think I was trying to keep the peace. I think I was trying to make things comfortable for my daughter. I think I told myself that being accommodating was being generous, and that generosity was a virtue. But I have thought about that dresser many times since. I think moving the dresser was the first time I agreed without meaning to, that his comfort came before my ownership. The night it changed was a Wednesday in September. My daughter was on an evening shift. It was just Keith and me in the house, which was not unusual, and I had been upstairs reading most of the day. Around 7, I came downstairs and made myself a plate of leftovers, roasted vegetables and some cold chicken I'd made the night before, and I took it to the living room. The news was on. I sat in my chair, the wing-back chair, and I ate my dinner and watched the news the same way I had done 10,000 times before in that house. He came in from the hallway about 10 minutes later. He stood in the doorway for a moment, and I could feel him looking at me before he said anything. "I need the room," he said. I looked up. "Sorry?" "I have a call in a few minutes, a business call. I need the room." I looked at him. I looked at my plate, which still had food on it. I looked at the television. "I won't be long," I said. "I'm just finishing dinner." "It would be better if you could go upstairs," he said. "Not would you mind, not I'm sorry to ask, not could I just have a few minutes. Just it would be better if you could go upstairs." As though I were an inconvenience to be relocated, as though the room were already his and he was simply informing me of the arrangement. I set my fork down. "I want to tell you that I said something then, something measured and clear and unarguable. But I did not. I sat there for a moment with the particular stillness that comes over me when I am absorbing something I cannot quite believe is happening, and then I picked up my plate and I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed in the room that has been my room since 1993. I ate the rest of my cold chicken and my cold roasted vegetables, and something shifted in me, very quietly, like a key turning. I did not sleep well that night. I kept going over the moment in my head, not with anger exactly, but with a kind of accumulated tiredness I had not fully acknowledged before. I thought about the dresser in the basement. I thought about the router conversation. I thought about the afternoons in the kitchen when I could hear him on the phone in the living room talking about property values and investment opportunities, his voice carrying through the walls of my house. I thought about my daughter and how she had stopped asking me how I was doing, the way you stop asking when you are afraid of the answer. In the morning, I called my friend Lorraine. Lorraine and I have known each other since our children were in primary school together, and she is the kind of person who listens without trying to fix things immediately, which is exactly what I needed. I told her everything, Not the version I had been telling myself, where I softened the edges and gave everyone the benefit of the doubt. The real version. The dresser. The living room. The plate of cold chicken on the edge of my own bed. Lorraine was quiet for a moment when I finished. Then she said, "Do you remember what you taught your students about passive voice?" I laughed, which surprised me. "You need to talk to someone who knows tenancy law," she said. "Not because you want to fight, but because you need to know exactly where you stand." I had not used the word tenancy in my own thinking. They were not tenants. They were my daughter and her partner, staying temporarily. But Lorraine said in the province of Ontario, when someone has lived somewhere for longer than a certain period and has established patterns of residency, certain protections apply, and those protections cut both ways. I called a lawyer that afternoon, a woman in Guelph who specializes in residential matters. I did not tell my daughter I was calling. The consultation was 45 minutes. The lawyer was brisk and kind in equal measure, which I appreciated. She explained that because Keith and my daughter had been residing in my home for over a year, they had acquired some legal status as occupants. Not full tenancy rights, but more than nothing. If I wanted them to leave, I would need to give proper notice. Written notice. Formal notice, the kind that creates a paper trail. She also said something I have thought about many times since. She said, "You are the homeowner. The law is on your side, but you have to be the one to use it. No one will use it for you." I drove home with that sentence sitting in the passenger seat. I had always believed, without ever putting it into words, that kindness and accommodation would eventually be recognized and reciprocated. I had believed that if I was patient and generous, and did not make things difficult, things would resolve themselves in a way that was fair. I was 63 years old, and I was still waiting for fairness to arrive on its own. It does not arrive on its own. I gave myself 1 week to think, not to change my mind, by that point my mind was settled, but to think about how to do what I needed to do with care. My daughter was going to be hurt. I understood that. I was not trying to end her relationship or make her choose. I was trying to get my house back, and those are different things even when they feel connected. I wrote the notice myself, using the template my lawyer had sent me, and I had the lawyer review it before it went anywhere. It was formal and correct and completely without cruelty. It gave them 60 days. It said that the arrangement was no longer workable for the homeowner, meaning me, and that the property would need to be vacated by a specified date. I did not leave it on the kitchen table or slip it under a door. I put it in an envelope and I handed it to my daughter directly on a Thursday evening when she came home from work. She stood in the entryway with her coat still on and looked at the envelope, and then at me, and then she opened it. She did not speak for a long time. "Mum," she finally said. "I love you," I told her. "That hasn't changed, but this is my home." She cried. I held her. It was one of the hardest things I have done, and I have done some hard things. Keith's reaction was different. He came out of the bedroom about 20 minutes later, when my daughter had gone in to talk to him, and he stood in the hallway with the letter in his hand and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face before. Not the entitlement, not the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. Something else, something smaller. "You can't do this," he said. "I have done it," I said. "My lawyer has reviewed it. The notice is legal and correct. This is your daughter's home, too." "My daughter is welcome in my home," I said. "The notice is for the arrangement that has been in place. It is time for that to change." He said a few more things after that. He raised his voice. He said I was being vindictive, that I had never given him a fair chance, that I was doing this to break them up. I stood in my own hallway and I listened, and I did not raise my voice back, and I did not apologize, and I did not take back a single word of the letter. Eventually he went back into the bedroom and closed the door. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. The good kind, the loose leaf I keep for when I need something that takes a little longer to prepare. I stood at the counter and waited for the kettle, and I thought, I should have done this 8 months ago. The 60 days were not easy. My daughter and I had several difficult conversations. There were evenings when I could hear them talking through the wall, and mornings when she came to breakfast with eyes that told me she'd been crying. I did not waver, but I also did not harden. I tried to stay open to her, to keep making dinner, to keep asking about her work, to keep being her mother even when the air between us was strained. What I would not do was take back the notice. What I would not do was pretend the 11 months had not happened, or agree that I owed anyone an apology for reclaiming what was mine. 3 weeks into the 60 days, my daughter came to me with a plan. She had found a 2-bedroom apartment in Hamilton. Newer building, close to the hospital where she worked, a price that was manageable on her salary alone if Keith contributed, which she said he had committed to doing. She showed me the listing on her phone. She looked at me with that expression she has had since she was a child, the one that asks for something without quite saying what. I told her it looked like a good apartment. I told her Hamilton had a lot going for it. I meant both of those things. She moved out on a Saturday, 5 days before the 60-day deadline. Keith carried boxes without speaking to me. I helped my daughter wrap her things in newspaper the way we had always done when she moved. We worked side by side for most of the morning, and at one point she laughed at something. I did not even remember what. And the laugh was real, the old laugh, and I thought, we are going to be all right. The night after they left, I walked through the house slowly, room by room. I brought the dresser up from the basement. It took me 2 hours and 3 rest stops and a phone call to my neighbor's son, who came over and helped me with the stairs without asking any questions, which is a quality I admire enormously in a person. I moved the router back to where I had always had it. I put the shelves back in the entryway and arranged them the way I had always liked, with the photograph of my late husband and me at Niagara-on-the-Lake, and the small blue vase my mother had brought back from Halifax, and the stack of books that have been sitting in a bag in the closet for 11 months. Then I went to the living room and I sat in my chair, the wing-back chair near the window, and I turned on the news at exactly the volume I prefer, which is louder than most people like it, because I spent too many years in a gymnasium full of teenagers, and my hearing has paid the price. And I sat there. It was a Tuesday. The light was the way it gets in October, that particular sideways gold that comes through the front window in the late afternoon. The house was quiet in a way it had not been for nearly a year. Not an empty quiet, not a sad quiet, the quiet of a place that belongs to itself again. My daughter called that evening, not to relitigate anything, just to say they had gotten the keys and the apartment was smaller than the photos suggested, but the kitchen had good light and she thought they could make it work. I told her I was glad. I meant that too. I have thought a lot about what I would say to someone who finds herself in the place I was in 11 months ago. Standing at a counter in her own kitchen, holding a mug with a chipped handle, listening to a man she barely knows tell her how much space she takes up. I would say, you already know. You already know, the moment it happens, that something has gone wrong. You know in your body before your mind catches up. That stillness that comes over you, that strange quietness, that is not passivity. That is you, absorbing information you haven't yet decided what to do with. Do something with it. Not out of anger, not to win, but because the house has your name on the deed, and the deed is a document, and documents mean something, and you are allowed to use them. I am 63 years old. I retired after 28 years of teaching other people's children how to find the right words. It took me 11 months and 1 cold plate of chicken and a phone call to a lawyer to find them for myself. But I found them, and the chair by the window is mine again. I still think about the dresser sometimes, not with bitterness, I moved past that a while ago, but with a kind of quiet clarity. Because the dresser was the moment. Not the night in the living room, not the cold chicken on the edge of my bed. The dresser was where it actually started, where I quietly agreed to something I never should have agreed to, and I did not even notice I was doing it. That is how these things happen, not all at once, in increments, one small concession at a time, each one reasonable enough on its own, until you look up one day and realize you are a guest in your own home. I do not blame myself for being kind. Kindness is not the problem. But I think there is a difference between kindness and the abdication of your own good judgment, and for 11 months I confused the two. I told myself that yielding was generous. What it actually was, I think, was a failure of honesty, with myself and in a quieter way, with my daughter. Because when I did not tell her the truth about what was happening, I was not protecting her. I was protecting her. I was protecting the idea that things would work themselves out, and things do not work themselves out, they just continue. What changed was not anger. I want to be clear about that. What changed was understanding. The lawyer in Guelph said something I have repeated to myself many times since. You have to be the one to use the law. No one will use it for you. That is true of more than law, I think. It is true of your voice, your home, your sense of what you are owed as a person who has spent 63 years building a life. None of it enforces itself. You have to show up and say, this is real, and it matters, and I am not moving. There is a kind of intelligence in knowing when patience has become passivity. I had the information I needed long before I acted on it. I knew every time Keith spoke to me as though I were an inconvenience to be managed, that something was wrong. I felt it. I just kept finding reasons to wait. It took one conversation with an old friend and one consultation with a lawyer to understand that what I was waiting for was never going to arrive on its own. And there is something to be said for doing the hard thing quietly. I did not shout. I did not make a scene. I wrote a letter, had it reviewed, and handed it to my daughter in person. That took more out of me than any argument would have. Staying calm when you are hurt, acting with care when you are angry, doing the right thing in the right way, even when you could be forgiven for doing it badly. That is the harder work. That is the work I am most proud of. My daughter and I talk every week now. She is settling into the Hamilton apartment. She sounds like herself again. Keith has a part-time position, apparently, which I hope works out for them. I do not wish him badly. I simply do not wish him in my living room. The chair by the window is mine. The dresser is back where it belongs. And I have learned at 63 that clarity is not cruelty, and that the most loving thing you can do for someone sometimes is to stop absorbing the consequences of choices that are not yours to carry.